Hey everyone, welcome to ISO 400. I thought I'd try something different with today's introduction. Up until this point, it's always been the case where I welcome you to the episode, I say a couple of sentences about the photographer and his or her work, and I thank the musician who has so graciously provided the music for each episode. But I thought I'd try something more along the lines of a conversational riff about photography at the outset. Usually I record these intros and outros the day I do the interview, but this is one of those instances where that's not the case. I recorded this episode a couple of days ago. Today is Tuesday, October 6th, and you'll see this on Friday, October 9th, or at some point thereafter. I came across a body of work this morning that there's something up with it, and it's not good, and I think it's important to talk about at least a little bit, and I'll tell you why. There was a Hungarian photographer who thought it would be a good idea to do a migrant and refugee crisis inspired photo shoot in which he worked with the model, I'm guessing in Hungary, and dressed her up in clothing that looks vaguely like what you see refugees wearing in photos from the ongoing crisis. The model is in a number of different poses, near a barbed wire fence, and in some of them there is a police officer who appears to be tugging at her somewhat violently. And these images are not, in my mind, they're not good. When you take on a project, a documentary or otherwise, if you're looking to tell a story or explore some kind of concept, there are ways to go about it where the images are good and there's intention and integrity behind them, and people are talking about them hopefully in a positive light. This series, it's not the case. It's largely an insult to those who have lost everything and are continuing to risk their lives to reach safer shores, and that's to say nothing of the photographers. Good, honest, hardworking photographers who are risking their lives in some cases to tell these stories. So how exactly does that relate to today's guest? Well, today's guest, Amy Lombard, takes great approaches to her documentary projects and editorial assignments. Her images are fun to look at. She makes bold use of color and flash, and there's intention and integrity behind each photograph she makes. It's good work. She makes good work. And the conversation we had was great. I think you'll enjoy it. So, as always, our music is provided by Yuki Futami, a New York-based jazz musician. Thanks so much, and hope you enjoy.
I was turned to your work fairly recently, and in looking at it since, there's a tremendous amount of fun in your photographs. There's an electricity there and a liveliness, and part of that has to do, I think, with your use of flash, and the fact that you shoot in color. And I'm wondering what led you to those two artistic choices in your photography?
Okay, well, so in terms of flash, when I had just started photography, I was one of those people who I never thought that I would use any kind of artificial light source. And so when I was in school, a friend of mine got this. It was a Sunpack 622 Super. And if you're not familiar, I mean, it's an enormous flash. It's like this big. And I saw him using it, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And so I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna use it a few times and see what's up." So the first time that I used it, it was with my TLR, and suddenly it was like the world came alive. Like everything just made sense. And ever since then, I don't think I've stopped using flash at all. What I loved about using the flash was that suddenly you're able to see these little details that you're not able to see with the naked eye. And it was able to elevate these ordinary moments that you see in a really different way. Like it could be a picture of someone's shoe, but like if it's just broad daylight outside, it doesn't seem that interesting. But suddenly with the flash, it's like almost like a spotlight highlighting these things. And in terms of it being fun, a lot of the things that my life is fun. Like everything that everything that I have to do, it's like I can't believe the life that I live sometimes. I'm like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. Like this is amazing. And just by nature of the events and people I meet, it's, kind of a combination of everything.
Yeah. And your choice of shooting in color instead of black and white, What was the idea behind that?
Um, I guess when I started photography, like back in high school in a serious way and was shooting black and white,
Mm-hmm.
I was really into that for a while, but then I guess it felt kind of limiting in a sense. And I think that they seemed a little bit more moody in a way
Mm-hmm.
that, like, I think that if you were to turn my photographs from saturated to unsaturated, they would have a completely different feel.
Sure.
So I just felt like shooting black and white didn't quite align with my vision in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the world is pretty amazing. Like the colors that we're able to see,
Yeah.
it just makes sense for my work, I think.
Yeah. And based on previous interviews I had read, it seemed like when you were starting out, the style of photography you wanted to do seemed to be at odds with what you were being taught,
Yes.
and that you had to kind of like push back, push against what was being told to you, and you had an idea of who you were as a photographer. How did you stay the course? How did you know that this is who I am? This is what I want to do?
So one thing about me that is great and terrible at the same time is I'm very stubborn
Okay.
and I don't like being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to do something, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like in school, we were taught to look at like Philip Lorca de Corsia, Jeff Wall, and all these people who are masters. Like these people are incredible photographers. But I just didn't relate to the type of photography I was being told was either commercially viable or what was going to get you in galleries. And I just felt like I'm not going to be something I'm not. It would make me miserable.
Right.
So I just kind of felt like, okay, well, if it makes me happy, that's all that matters. And if there's an audience for it, there's an audience for it. And if not, I get a job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I don't have to. At that point in my life when I was in school, my mindset was kind of like, I don't necessarily have to make money with photography, which my mom was like, why the fuck are you in school then? Why are you paying all the money for an art school degree? And I was like, I don't know. But fortunately it has, and this is my full-time gig now. So it's kind of like the dream.
Yeah. No. And when in the course of your career since getting out of school and establishing a vision, was there a point at which you felt you had finally arrived?
In terms of like being a professional photographer?
Yeah. I mean, being successful and, I mean, seeing that happen, whether it's in publications or, working with people and all of that.
I wouldn't say there has been a particular moment where I've been like, I've arrived, because I still don't really feel that way. It's like,
Sure.
But I guess that, well, when I was like 15, 16, I made this list of things that I wanted to accomplish in life. And I'm like definitely like patting myself on the back a little bit right now.
Sure.
But I finished that when I was 23, and when I quit my full-time job when I was like 2 years out of school, and then when I freelanced, when I finished that, I thought I was like really proud of myself. I was like, okay, I'm on the right course. I have not arrived, but I'm getting there, and I've accomplished all of these things. And so I just kind of felt like the sky's the limit. Like if I really put my mind to something, I can do it.
Yeah. And I think another defining feature of your work is outside of your I would say bold use of flash and the fact that it's got these lively colors, is that what you choose to shoot. A lot of your photographs are kind of offbeat. If I'm looking at, say, your Bronies series or Amy Goes to a Dildo Factory. What is it that attracts you to these stories as opposed to other ones?
Well, I guess for instance, the story that I shot on Bronies, now that seems to be like an event that's widely covered. But at the time, I think this was in 2011 that I shot that. I'm really drawn to things that feel underreported or not translated visually. Before I was doing this full time, I had worked at Life. Right. And when you work in the Life archive, there are so many stories that, you don't think of when you associate with the Life brand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the goal was really to cover all walks of life. And so they have these really kind of obscure photo essays
Mm-hmm.
that I was drawn to, from like a seeing eye cat to, I don't know, anything like that. And so I was always drawn to these stories that I felt like were important, that people wanted to see, that a lot of media outlets wouldn't cover. So at the time, Bronies kind of felt like a natural fit for something like that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people weren't really photographing it. And as for the dildo factory, I think that's kind of the same thing. I mean, like, how often do you see somebody make a dildo?
Not really, no.
Yeah. It was a good life experience. I was happy about that one.
Yeah, I'm sure. And if we could go back just a little bit further, another thing I had read was that early on you had taken a photo course. I think it was at Moore College of Art and Design, and you weren't feeling all that great about photography.
I hate it.
Coming out of that course. But a few months later, you enrolled in another one at Tyler School of Art. And I'm wondering having hated it then, and what was it in those few months that kind of changed your mind and made you think, I'll give this another shot?
Honest to God, I have no idea. I have no idea what compelled me. At that point in my life, when I started that first photo class, I thought, oh, this could be like an interesting option, like go to art school. In my mind, it was like either do something art related or do something fashion related. And I think that I had worked at a boutique at that point, and I hated it so much. And I was like, okay, maybe fashion isn't what I want to do. Maybe I'll try this photography thing again. That's the only kind of reasoning I can even come up with behind choosing that photo class again. And I also think it was like something to do. I was not really like a sports person or anything like that in high school, so I felt like I had to do these extracurricular type of things.
I understand.
But I'm so glad that I did, because that class changed my life so much and just made me appreciate photography and the art of storytelling in a way that first class that I hated so much didn't.
And what was it about that second class that kind of changed things for you and brought you back?
It was, I always just remember this one guy I met on the bus. So Tyler School of Art is, at the time, it wasn't on Temple's main campus. You had to take this bus through North Philly. And if my mom had seen me go through these neighborhoods, like, she would have never let me do this ever. So while I was taking the bus back into Center City, I met this film student, and he really just kind of taught me that everybody has a story and that it's worth sharing, in so many words. And just something about that interaction with a stranger really resonated with me. And suddenly I felt like I had this purpose to take photographs. Whereas before, like in that first class, I didn't really know what to photograph. I was photographing flowers and stop signs, like very deviant art. And suddenly it was like, okay, if I focus on people and what their stories are and what brings them to a certain place, or a reasoning behind who they are, the fact that I can tell that in a photograph is something that's really powerful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And having that renewed sense of purpose and sort of a focus, knowing where you needed to turn your lens next. What were some of the early stories you worked on to kind of work through that and get into the swing of things photographically?
So I mean, pretty much from that interaction, I just kind of wandered aimlessly around the city, and I would just go up to people and take their portrait. I mean, like, similar to so many other photographers, it's like a borderline cliche, but I was very interested in street photography and photographing people who I had met, whether they were in like South Philly or if I was in Center Philly, just kind of like roaming around and talking to whoever I could.
And now, how has New York, living in New York, has that informed your photography at all? And if so, how? I'm sure it's a different pace than Philly.
Yes, I mean, definitely a different pace, but in a good way, because I think to live in a place like New York, you have to be on your grind constantly, or you just can't live here,
Sure.
for many reasons, financially and just by nature of like the culture that is here. But in terms of how it's changed my photography, I think that the culture around art here is so strong. And when I first moved here in particular, it was like really the height of the photo blog. And a lot of these communities were still kind of like coming together in real life, whether it was like art exhibitions or something like that. But I felt like being around these people who were so art focused took my work out of this street photography function and translated it into something that was a little bit more vivid, a little bit more put together and tight. And it just helped sense of it and bring it to a different level.
And something I've tried in my own work with using Flash. It's in terms of kind of like slipping into the background. It can be a little difficult when you're using Flash with whoever it is you're photographing. And I'm wondering how, because there's a real sense of rawness and honesty, I think, in your photographs across your various documentary projects. And how have you managed to sort of slip into the background, say, while using the Flash?
That's a good question. I guess it depends from various, whatever the project I'm working on. But sometimes like I really feel like I'm invisible. Like I can just kind of like float around and take whatever picture I want. Or sometimes I'm just pretty unapologetic about it. Like I'll be like a Bruce Gilden type of thing and flash you. But I think it's also kind of my personality. Like I can just kind of exist and not be super intrusive, but with also being intrusive and getting the photographs that I want. So I'm not sure if that totally answers that question, but it's something I can't particularly define.
No, I hear. Well, at least in terms of working on a documentary project, say finding the topic or finding the people, how much time do you spend with them before you start taking photographs? If you have a window in the beginning where you're establishing a rapport and explaining your intentions.
It varies from project to project, but sometimes I like to go in and kind of like talk to them for maybe 20 minutes or so. Sure. It also depends on how long the event is, or if I'm planning on going back more than one time and things like that. And sometimes people, they need a little bit of coddling, and they need some understanding of who I am and where I'm coming from before they're going to be open to me photographing them. So sometimes it can be 20 minutes, sometimes it can be a few hours. It really just depends on what I can do to make these people or the situation feel comfortable about me being there and having them know that I'm not coming from like some bad place where I'm trying to make them look bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Were there any particular situations or stories where you ran up against someone who wasn't terribly open to it? And how did you maybe work around that or convince them?
I'm trying to think of a specific one. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it happens pretty often when I'm asked to make a portrait of someone for like a magazine or a newspaper or something like that. A lot of people get very insecure, and I just try to be nice and charming and try to make them feel good about themselves so that the pictures aren't like awkward and, that kind of thing.
And one of your recent accomplishments was getting a grant from the VSCO Artist Initiative. And if you could tell me more about what the project is and how the grant is going to help sort of further what it is you're doing.
Right. So I got this grant from VSCO, when was it? February, March, or something around that time period. But I had been working on this project on meetups, and it all started, what year? It might have been almost 2 years ago. kind of accidentally. I went to this Staten Island pug meetup. And I went because at that time I was really interested in like what I will define as like dog culture and kind of our relationship with animals. And so I went for that reason, but I left being kind of amazed at the power of the internet and how it was bringing these 30 some odd people together based off the love of like one specific thing, that being pugs. And like people even got married from this meetup.
Really?
Yeah, so it's like a romantic comedy waiting to happen.
Interesting.
And I just found myself, I mean, without even realizing that I had something there, going to different types of meetups, whether it was, you know, a stay-at-home dad, whether it was a Wiccan meetup, so many different things. And at a certain point, I was like, someone said to me, they're like, all you do is go to meetups. And I was like, okay, that's one, rude. But I was like, okay, I think I have something here, but what am I going to do with it? I thought maybe someone would give me a column. They weren't into it. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it myself, and it's going to be amazing, and, you know, maybe people will be into it. And so I just started slowly making more work and putting it together. And then I was friends with Josh Wool on Facebook, who was also a recipient of this grant. And I saw that he received it, and I was like, oh, this is actually a really amazing opportunity. These kind of opportunities don't exist for artists, really. And VSCO being such a photo-centric company, while like other artists also use the platform as well, I was like, well, maybe I have a shot here. And I wasn't sure if I had a chance, but when I got the call back, I was like, yes, this is awesome. And so fortunately I got the grant. And what I love about working with them is that they're so supportive. And also just the idea of having this project that's really how the internet brings people together, and using like an arts and technology company that's, you know, further pushing that message out into the world. It just made sense for me in the work, and just how it would develop since getting that grant. But what I love most about this project is the idea that now it's really a choice to be alone. There's so many platforms to connect with people. And so I really think that my project in a way is like an optimistic view of the internet and community in this day and age.
Yeah, and in the course of working on this project, both before you got the grant and then since having worked with VSCO, what have you learned about yourself as a photographer in the process of doing this over the considerable period of time?
What have I learned about myself? That's a good question. Are we talking about just like work in process, about the project at large?
All of it.
All of it. Okay. Well, there are so many things that I feel like I've learned since I've gotten that grant, just because by nature of the time frame since I got the grant to now, my career and my work has, you know, cranked up a little bit. So I'm very busy, and it's definitely taught me a lot about time management. And even the one thing that's really, really, really important to me about this project, I feel so lucky that I am able to make a living as a photographer. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, of course.
And I'm really proud of myself. But that said, it's so important to have your own work. And it's so important to make work outside of doing commissions or commercial work and things like that. So having this project has really taught me that you have to make time for yourself. And you have to make sure you're making the photographs that you want to make constantly. So I think that that's one of the most important things that I've learned with this project, and that I think is going to stick with me even after it's done. It's like you need to have your own thing.
And how much more is there, do you think, to do for this project?
I would say it's halfway done.
Okay.
I'm kind of trying to be really strategic about the meetups that I'm doing now, and trying to be as comprehensive. In a way, I feel like it's like mapping out the interests that make up our larger culture. So I don't want to have a lot of things that feel too niche and that feel a little bit like, I don't want everything to be like cosplay-esque.
Right.
So I want to have going to like some like feminist meetups, book clubs, things like that. So it's really just about picking the communities that I feel like are representative of what I'm trying to show. So I would say I'm thinking the next 6 to 8 months, I'll hopefully be done at that point.
All right. Well, looking forward to the completed thing. And somewhat tangentially related, as far as, you know, putting yourself in a space and photographing, you had this project called Happy Inside, your IKEA project, which culminated in a book, I think, right? So the photographs are, I think, fantastic, and oddly hilarious in a way, as far as like looking at life in such a manufactured space, even though it's supposed to like mimic home. How did you get the idea for this project? How long were you working on it? How did you, in a sense, I guess, get away with it? I mean, because you're using flash in an IKEA, which is not subtle. So tell me about it.
Okay. This project started kind of in the same period of time when I was in school, and I felt like people were just showing me these photographs that I didn't want to make.
Right.
And particularly like the Blork Decor show, where he's staging these really beautiful moments.
Right.
And I think that we had a project on staging reality. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to photograph the rooms in IKEA. And the key for me getting through art school was to take everything so literally. It's like I was such a dickhead. And so I went in there and I did that. And then in a few frames, there were people in them just by accident.
Right.
And I looked at them and I was like, that's kind of hilarious and amazing.
Yeah.
It says a lot about consumerism and just like where we're at, even though it's, IKEA is a Swedish company. It just feels so American.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go back and see if I can keep doing this. And the thing about my setup was I was still, right now I'm shooting mostly digital. But at the time I was shooting with this TLR that's the Mamiya C330, which is like a pretty decent sized camera. Yeah. And then I had my Sunpack 622, which is, like I said, this big.
Yeah.
And there was nothing subtle about what I was doing. And I was, fortunately, I look like I'm like 10. So I think a lot of the times people are like, oh, what's that teenager doing? Right. But I had only gotten asked to stop twice, and I was doing it for a year and a half.
Really?
Almost, yeah. Nobody stopped me. So I went to IKEAs everywhere from like New Haven, Brooklyn, Baltimore, everywhere. And it was one of those things that was only going to function in book form.
Sure.
It's like you take one picture out and it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, it was, I still can't even go into IKEA now because I in literally every single weekend, and I feel like there's like this overwhelming dread when I go in there.
Yeah, I can imagine. So like how many hours say at a time would you spend on each IKEA trip in there, walking around, photographing?
Maybe like 3 hours.
Oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
But a year and a half, it's considerable. And so what was it like designing the book and seeing that come to fruition?
So that was such a learning experience. I had never done something like that before. And I worked with Daniel Pianetti, who he's just like a genius. He totally gets it. And he was able to sequence and help me kind of like, our styles are very different, but I thought in a way that it was really complementary in the book form and how he designed the cover and things like that. So taught me a lot about pairing images and sequencing and editing and making sure everything is tight. And yeah, and the process of making a book is amazing, and I hope to do it again soon.
And what was it like? This was your first book, yeah?
Yes.
And so, what was it like seeing it completed? I mean, getting it fresh, hardcover, opening it.
Oh my God, I was so excited. It was like a kid in a candy store seeing all of these books arrive to my parents' home in Pennsylvania, and it was just like a ton of boxes of books that had my name on them. It was just like a dream come true.
Well,
Really.
belated kudos on
Yeah, thank you.
on making that happen. Another thing I want to ask, in terms of being a creative individual, part and parcel of that is that the creativity occasionally runs out, and you hit slumps. Whether it's the photos aren't working, they're not happening, or you don't have the drive. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had creative slumps. It seems you have had creative slumps.
Yeah.
When you find yourself in one, how do you work through them? Like, what's your method of dealing with these dry spells?
Let's see. Well, I would just like to say it's the fucking worst. I feel like I've been going through one a little bit this week. So in particular, this definitely resonates.
Sure.
I'm a very overdramatic person.
Okay.
And for me, it's like if I'm not making something I'm proud of, it just completely drains me and makes me feel like a piece of shit. And it's like I feel like I have no purpose. But I feel like there's always a breaking point when I'm like, you are being a baby bitch. Get it together. Strategize. Think about what you're doing. I feel like I always just have to kick myself in the ass a little bit and get myself back into gear. And then I think that there's always like a moment where everything makes sense, where it's like either you find this amazing project or, I mean, for me, it's like maybe discovering a group of people I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
But I think that feeling like shit is part of the process.
Oh yeah. No doubt.
It makes you better, it makes you stronger, and just constantly reevaluating what you're doing. Like for me, like this week, I've been looking at the photographs I'm making, and I'm like, I'm feeling predictable. I'm like, how do I? So now I'm just like, okay, maybe I need to get new equipment. Maybe I need to just shake things up. I don't know. So I think that being aware of it is also a good thing. I think a lot of people just get stuck and they don't know they're in a slump.
Right.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yes, it does. And as far as avoiding, and I think something most people want to avoid is, at least creatively, is predictability. And so how do you keep photography fresh for yourself?
That's a good question. How do I keep photography fresh for myself? I think that it's just a matter of pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Like if you feel like you're just photographing the same things over and over again, then it's time to stop doing that. Or maybe it's time for a different medium. Like for me, I've always kind of felt like phase 2 of my life, I'd be making documentary films or like a documentary series, and working more in that space. So I don't know. I think it's just, you have to be proactive about these things.
And as far as, just to go back a quick sec, as far as dealing with creative slumps and having to kick yourself, is that something you've had from the beginning, or is that something you developed?
I think that that's just who I am as a person in general.
Okay.
I'm pretty hard on myself, and I think you have to be. I don't want to wallow in self-pity. And it's like you could stay in that slump forever if you don't force yourself out of it. Like being happy and being creative is a choice.
Right.
And
of course it is.
So.
And also, as far as when you were doing the book and you were working with this other guy and sequencing the images, outside of that, I think at least one of the biggest challenges, at least in my work, and I know for a lot of my friends and colleagues, is learning to edit your own work. And killing your babies is never an easy thing to do. And I'm wondering how have you learned to do that for yourself, and what has that been like?
I know that everybody says that everyone says that nobody's a good editor of their work.
Mm.
I disagree. I think I'm a great editor of my own work. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm also just coming from an editorial background where I worked as an editor.
Right.
Previously.
Was that at Life? Or where was it?
I worked at Life for 2 years and then Time for 2 years.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that I'm able to pick up on relationships between images. I don't know. For me, I like doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There are some times when, every artist is going to be nitpicky about the integrity of their work and
of course,
what images are selected. But there are some times when I'll see like a slideshow of images and I'm just like, oh, I wouldn't have chose that image to go after that one.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I am a terrible editor of my own work, but I feel like it always makes the most sense when I put it together.
Yeah.
I'm also a control freak, if you haven't noticed.
And in terms of now you're doing a lot of commissioned work. You're working a lot with magazines and doing portrait shoots. When you get an assignment, what's in your bag?
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again.
When you get an assignment from a magazine, like you had your Vanity Fair shoot a couple of days ago, what's in your bag when you go on one of these shoots?
Okay, so I have. Wait, this is actually pretty funny. I have my bag next to me right now, and
how good?
Okay, let's see. I have 2 of these guys.
Very nice.
Always. I have a Canon 5D Mark III, and then I bring my 5D Mark II body with me. Mm-hmm. But my favorite thing, hold on. It should be in here. I have this really big bag of batteries that everybody is always like, what the hell is wrong with you?
It's more important than they realize.
Right? Like, just in case my battery and it's like kind of ghetto. It's like literally a Ziploc bag.
Yeah.
But other than that, I have a notebook, laptop, pens. I feel like I just try to bring as much as I possibly can and prepare for the worst.
Sure. And in terms of, do you tend to shoot wide or do you shoot longer? Wait,
you're breaking up. Say that again?
Lens choice. Do you tend to shoot wide or longer, medium, focal lengths?
I always use the 24-105. Always.
That gives a good range, I think.
Yeah, it's just a pretty standard lens, I think, and pretty universal.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
What's next? Finishing this VSCO project.
Sure.
I feel like I need to. I always think of like a zillion things that I want to do, but for me right now, it's just making sure that that's finished and then I can make that the best project that I possibly can, and really focusing on that. And aside from that, just continuing to grow my photography business and, I guess trying to be more selective about the type of projects that I do. Yesterday I did a shoot for a billboard with this music manager. And while, being a pop star and being a photographer are 2 separate things, but just the thought process that went into every decision that they were doing was something that I was like, okay, well, that's really smart. And something I hope to do in the next year or so. So yeah, just doing things with a little bit more intention and just trying to be strategic about most of my career and life decisions.
Yeah, of course. Well, best of luck. Something I ask photographers in all of these interviews, and it's tailored to the photographer's experience. If you could give if you could give a piece of advice to someone, a photographer who's looking to start work, on a long-term documentary project, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say do what feels right and see it through till the very end, and make sure you research everything and are respectful of whatever the nature of the subject may be. But I just think that you kind of have to do your own thing. Like, I think that you could give advice to anyone. It's
Sure.
like, I don't know. But yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. You're doing a lot of great work, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for watching. This has been ISO 400. If you'd like to see more of Amy's work, you can check out her website, amylombard.com, or you can follow her on Instagram at Amy Lombard. And if you like what we do, please hit subscribe down below and share this with your friends. Thanks so much, and see you next time.